Welcome to another episode of Make Mental Health Matter. On Mondays, I talk to guests who are either professionals in the mental health space, advocates of mental health, or simply just want to help people in the mental health, substance use, suicide prevention, or holistic realm. And I am excited actually today. I'm bringing back one of my guests. So if you happen to watch our World Suicide Prevention Day special, you would have seen my guest on that special. And I'm slowly bringing all of them back because I felt like 20 minutes wasn't long enough to even talk with them. So, hearing their stories, and most of them I just met for the first day when we were on there, and really hearing their story. And so I was like, oh my gosh, of course, as with all our guests, they are simply amazing. And I know that they can really have an impact in this thing that we call life with what they're doing, and it fits and it aligns. So, if you happen to be watching this for the first time and you're watching it on YouTube, there's a little subscribe button. Please make sure you mash that down. If you're watching it on any of the TV streaming platforms, add us into your wish list, your watch list. I don't know what they actually call it. I should probably figure out. I mean, I've been doing this for how many months now? But add us into that place so that you don't forget, because I promise you, every single guest that I have is, again, simply amazing. And the information that they're able to give you is helpful and needed. So, without further ado, I am going to bring up my guest for today, Dr. Zakiya Mabery. Thank you so much for joining me again.
Thank you so much, Kelly, for having me. And hello to all of your viewers.
Yeah. So tell the audience, those people that didn't happen to see you, tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Sure, I'm Dr. Zakiya, and I work in the diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility space. And I've been working in it for almost 20 years. Started in the federal government, working in equal opportunity, where you go file complaints if you think you're being discriminated against. Then gradually went into HR, human resources, and then dove into diversity and inclusion. And so now I help organizations such as the federal government, colleges and universities, and nonprofits ensure they're moving the inclusion needle within their organization. And one of the things I shared on your last show was that mental health is part of the overarching diversity, equity, and inclusion and accessibility conversation. Glad to be here.
Yeah, definitely. And I know when you came on, it was the first time you and I had met. And as I listened to what you talked about, I was like, oh my gosh, this so aligns. And that's why it's like I want to have you back.
Thank
um,
you.
so tell me a little bit more about what really got you into this field.
Well, what got me into the field was when I first graduated with my bachelor's in psychology. I went into the workforce and I was eager to make a change. And I worked for an organization which helped women who were struggling with addiction. And they also got to have their children with them in the program. It was an inpatient program. And I had a client who was struggling, and eventually she died by suicide. I left the industry almost within 2 weeks because I really took it to heart. And I my next position was with the federal government working in EEO, and it hasn't stopped since then. However, the conversation of mental health is a personal one to me for a multitude of reasons. Not just that first client that I've had died by suicide, but I myself have had struggles, family members, colleagues, and when I learned more about it and became more comfortable about sharing my story and being my authentic self, I saw the nexus with how it correlated with diversity, equity, and inclusion because it's part of disability inclusion. So that's a little bit how I began on this journey of being a voice for those who feel like they can't have a voice in a conversation.
Yeah, and that, I mean, just You gave me goosebumps. Just being able to, I mean, of course, going through that experience and you're like, this is not the right place for me. And then jumping into, I mean, government work, which some people are like, don't do that. But then others are like, oh my gosh, like it fills such a need across the board, and being able to have your own story and your own journey and really bringing that into everything that you do. I think that's so huge.
Thank you so much. It is huge, because especially in the Black and brown community, talking about mental health, there's a huge stigma surrounding that conversation. I'd had family members many years ago be like, you don't really want to share that, do you? But actually, I do, because it's about who I am. And when I'm sharing some of the obstacles, I'm also sharing some of the solutions to the things that I've gone through. And I think it's very impactful for those who are still in the valley going through different things, to see how someone may have made it through. And I just want to highlight, working in human resources, people may think, oh, well, you wouldn't have any microaggressions or macroaggressions or any discriminatory actions against you, but that's so not true. I absolutely have. And it is powerful to share, I believe, how you navigate challenging situations.
Yeah, I mean, I would actually, so thinking about HR and what I have experienced, right? I would actually think that there might be more sometimes, because you're having to deal with such a diverse population and different challenges. And most of the time, like, it's almost like going to the principal's office when you have to go talk to HR. But the whole thing is that you're leading organizations, like wherever you are in the human resources, and you have so many people that are coming and going, and you're part of the hiring and the firing process and all the things in between. And so I would almost think that it's more. So yes.
Well, you're smart, Kelly, because most people don't. But I agree. I would say that it is amplified because you're at the strategic level of the organization. And one of the things I know, as we're this month, we're celebrating Disability Awareness Month in employment, reasonable accommodations. I can tell you that was a challenge. Reasonable accommodations, for those of you that don't know, you can have them in the educational system and also in the workplace. It's just a modified way of doing your job. For me, one of them was being able to work remotely. This is way before 2020, the pandemic. But when I was working on spreadsheets or something that was a tedious task, being able to work at home, as long as I wasn't working on anything obviously classified, so that I could focus, because some of my challenges was being able to concentrate. And because I quote unquote don't look disabled, oftentimes I would get a lot of pushback and have to jump through so many ringers despite my doctors providing medical documentation. And I just would encourage, as you were just talking about the whole processes that we have within HR, retaining you. Employers do so much to bring people into their organization, but oftentimes, not just employers, but any other type of organization that people may be a part of, forget about the whole retention part. What are you doing to actually keep the individuals that you bring into the organization?
Yeah, that's, I mean, so my background is in corporate. That's where I came from, and then jumped into my nonprofit full time thinking I knew what I was doing. But it has been a huge experience for me just in board members. And I mean, I was in a leadership position in corporate, and I understood like how many people in sales, how many people we went through. And I felt like, and this is part of the reason why I left the corporate job, is because I felt like we were just numbers per se. It wasn't truly that they were valuing, like for me, very much in the space of trying to understand people, like why they do what they do. And I really wanted not to be best friends with all of my employees, but I also like, if they had a bad day, it was okay, right? It's not like I'm going to go fire you. But so often I heard that it's just about the numbers. It's just about the numbers. And it wasn't truly about the human. And I'm like, you spend almost $10,000 to bring an employee into a company, and then you're just willing to let them go because they quote unquote didn't hit their numbers or whatever it might be. So I see where that comment comes in, is like, how do we bring them in and retain them? And going back to like my board member comment is like, how do we keep people on board and like really wanting to lead the charge, especially, I mean, nonprofit spaces are a lot different, but lead the charge in making an impact, even in the DEI space too.
Exactly, Kelly. It starts with what you're saying. If your employee had a rough day and maybe they couldn't meet those metrics, leading with empathy. Because the old verbiage, what is it? Treat people how you want to be treated. It goes the same no matter where you are in the level of position within the organization. You want a person to feel like they belong, feel like they can come there and share with you with confidence, and confidentiality some struggles that they may be going through. And that's to include if they, or maybe a family member is going through some type of hardship because of a mental health impairment or a physical impairment, or no matter what it is, they could have just blown out their tire. They want to know that they can come to you, say this is what happened, and think about resolution and how they can move forward with them being the best version of themselves.
Yeah. And sometimes in corporate environments and businesses, I get like you have to run a business, like I totally understand that. But also, how do we find a resolution instead of being like, okay, bye, like I don't want you on my team anymore. So I think that is important. And I'm sure even in the government, like, I don't know, what comes to mind is it may even be more challenging in a way because there's a lot of like politics and procedures and policies that now you're adding on top of that stress. And so I hope that they are really, and I'm sure with what you're doing, they are really trying to be better at making accommodations for their employees.
Well, the process is in place, but people are going to be people. So there goes the stigma that we talk about often, Kelly. So there's a process in place, definitely within the federal government. Absolutely. Where how you fill out the paperwork and it goes from your supervisor to the EO office. But when people are analyzing the information, they're not necessarily looking at the data and the facts. So that's when we have to look at the culture in which we're working and try to have some workshops, some training. And it's not just not like a one and done, check the box. Oh, we had unconscious bias training, so now we're good. No, it's an ongoing cycle of changing the bureaucratic mindset, because yes, that's what a lot of organizations, to include the federal government, is bureaucratic red tape, and thinking beyond even having a box. I'm not going to say think out the box. There doesn't need to be a box there at all. We need people to be able to be innovative, solve problems, and be able to, like I keep circling back, feeling like they can be themselves at work. And I think that's when they actually thrive. And it's a win-win for not just the individual, but also the organization, because when someone feels comfortable in the environment, they're going to do more. You're going to do more for a supervisor or a leader that shows that they care about you, right?
Yeah, definitely. And you just said something that totally triggered one of the other main reasons that I left that corporate job, is because they brought in like a mental health facilitator, and it felt like it was like just the thing to do, but there was like no real follow up. And so I know for me, also being in the mental health space, it just wasn't in alignment for me. And that's when I ultimately made the choice, as like, everything that I'm trying to accomplish within my nonprofit, it's like going against me being in this corporate place, because it feels like to me lip service.
Fluff. Yep.
And
All fluff. Hmm.
yeah, and I would have worked so hard. I mean, I have lots more tools and techniques and resources that I do now than I ever did in the past. But I also know that I would absolutely work harder for somebody if they were empathetic, if they understood what I was going through. And I am one of those types. I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do, and I also need a little bit of grace and the space to be able to talk about whatever is going on and not feel like I'm going to be judged or lose my job or, have those things show up too.
One of the things that I found interesting, you talked about, you said follow up. I think follow up is extremely important. And again, a safe space. You said that as well. And that's one of the tools that I teach organization. Are we having sensing sessions where you can maybe have a non biased third party come in and take notes about what people are being said, analyze the data, and give recommendations to the leadership? Because people don't, if, like maybe if it's someone from HR, perhaps, they're gonna be like, they're not going to take what I have seriously because they're part of the problem, probably, maybe. So maybe have a consultant like yourself come in and talk. Maybe I would recommend still staying in contact with that formal organization because the work that you do is so powerful. Maybe you can go in and help be some of the solutions because you're now on the outside, you were on the inside, and you have all these amazing skills that you have added to your tool belt. But the follow through of seeing what is going on with the employees is so important. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, of course. And I would love to come in anytime. So if you know anybody, no.
Okay.
um I want to circle back a little bit, and if you're okay with kind of having the conversation as related to a Black woman and mental health in general, because I feel like this is a conversation, and I've had this conversation with multiple of my friends, one of my board members, and I, of course, as a woman, know it as a woman's side, but I don't know it as a Black woman's side. And so I'm curious, and I know that I've heard a lot in the BIPOC community. It is very hush hush. It's like one of those things that you don't talk about. Like you literally feel like it's not a conversation you can have. So, can you talk a little bit more about that?
First, shout out to Kelly because I'm glad that she asked the question. I researched you before I went on your show and I saw how real and authentic you were. And I just appreciate the question because it is different and we have to have tough, courageous conversations. So, yes, I always say I'm a triple diversity threat. I'm a Black woman with multiple disabilities. Now, I'm not really a threat, but to other people, I may be because people fear the unknown and what they're uncomfortable with. So, when I'm in certain situations that I've talked about in my career, I often don't know, is it because I'm a Black woman? Or is it because I had asked for a reasonable accommodation? I really don't know. But there is some layers that I feel like when I'm the only brown person in the room, I'm thinking, okay, it's probably because the pigmentation of my skin. And in those times, I had to reach really deep. And because of some mentors, what they poured into me, I still hold myself to the same level as I would if I was in a room full of people that look similar to me. I will still ask questions. I still will channel the status quo, even if it makes the other person uncomfortable. I want to give you an example. During the pandemic, a client hired me, and they're a large nonprofit that does work for people with disabilities. They're really well known, and I had worked with them in some capacity over the years, and I was really excited because disability inclusion, that's my thing. And one of the lead consultants made a comment when we were planning for a workshop, said something along the lines of her neighbor being Mexican and having a lot of people in the house or something, whatever it was, it rubbed me the complete wrong way being a person of color. So I felt a little off during my facilitation because I was thinking about what she said. So I tried to speak with her about it. She was not having it. She was not going to entertain the conversation. I was trying to tell her why that was offensive. Yes, we're doing great work here for people with disabilities, but you cannot make microaggressions against another marginalized group and while we're trying to help another group. So she would not have a conversation with me. I reached out to a senior leader. She did not want to have a conversation with me. So they stopped putting me on facilitation. However, I had a retainer and I was still getting paid every single month. So they were paying me thousands of dollars just until my contract ran out, simply because I wanted to have a conversation about what was said. So the lesson in that for me is that some people aren't willing to learn. And I feel that we can all learn from each other. if I were to say something to you that was offensive, I would want you to say something. And in one of my trainings, I talk about how we all say that we've been the victim of bias or some sort. We can all raise our hand when I ask that question, but when have you been the perpetrator? And
Mhm.
this came to mind clearly for myself. I'm Generation X, and I used to say things about another generation. And one of my, I used to have a digital show. One of my guests was like, "Well, Z," she called me Dr. Z. Well, Dr. Z, well, think about things that you have done. And I thought, oh my goodness, when I'm talking about like my niece's generation, that is not kind. That is being biased. So you have to be able to look at yourself when you're also pointing the finger at someone else or what they've gone through. So to answer your question about being a Black woman with disabilities, I think that I have a lot to juggle, but also I like to look at it from different perspectives.
Yeah. And so I know you talked about having the like focus disability. What are the other disabilities that you experience?
Oh my goodness, we'll be here for a long time. So I have a lot of non-apparent disabilities. Um, but then in 2019, I had major surgery on my right foot, reconstructive surgery. They did 7 procedures at one time. So just this weekend, I was using my walking cane to walk because of my fibromyalgia also. So I have a lot of different things, and it's just very concerning that people will like to judge me and think that I'm doing this work. I'm telling you, I'm self-identifying as a person with disabilities, and then look at me like you're not disabled. So I would say the physical disability has been probably one of the easier ones now, because they can see it. People, if they can see it, they can believe it. But if they can't see it, then they might think that you are just, I guess, making it up. And that has been more challenging um, in relation to employment, whether as myself as a business owner or when I was an employee.
Yeah, and I think like you said, I I do like to have the harder conversations or the ones that people don't like to touch, because I think it's important that we, and you said it perfectly there, is that physical disability is easy to tell, right? But it's the invisible disability that
Mhm.
people judge you for, or they like don't know how to ask the questions. And that's what I hear the most is they're like, okay, I know so and so is experiencing this, but I have no idea what to say to them or how to ask. And I'm like, just ask. Like, if they get offended, I would hope that they would tell you, but it's better to ask the question than assume and or avoid it altogether.
Wow, I agree. And I'm the big example person. So I'm going to give another example. I'm in the Georgia area, and I was doing some work for a group that I belong to. And I was speaking to a committee lead on something. And I was driving, and then there was a detour sign. So my brain is like, oh boy, because I don't really like driving too much anyway. So I'm trying to figure it out. And she's talking to me, and she says, I hear her say, well, Zakiya, it seems like you're getting upset. I said, what makes you think that? Because you paused and you didn't answer. I was trying to figure out where I was. I know this sounds like a very simple example, but it happens all the time. People make assumptions. And Kelly, she could have just said, oh, you paused. Is everything okay? Why did you pause? So that's a very short example, but it happens in all settings. I would behoove people to just ask a question. If you don't know what's going on or someone's behavior seems out of place to you, ask them. And I can tell you with confidence that I will tell you if I don't want to talk about it. I will say, you know what, I don't really want to talk about this. Can we move on? And I think most adults would.
Yeah, but I think that's also a really good point too, is we have to be able to advocate for ourselves, right? Like
Yeah,
if
that's
I'm
true.
in those
That's
moments that
true.
I'm like, and I do it too. I have those moments that I start a sentence and then I'm like, my brain is searching and I pause, and or driving, do the same thing also. And then I pause and it's like, I have to search for what's going on. As we were talking earlier before we jumped on, like I have a million tabs open on my desktop. And I know I've had several friends recently that asked if I've ever been um, tested for ADHD. And I was like, I don't
Mhm.
really need to get tested because I'm pretty sure I do.
Yes. Yes, being neurodivergent brings its sets of challenges, but also we can multitask different things than I would say the average person. But yes, I was tested as an adult and diagnosed with ADHD.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know my mom, she had late onset and my other sister did. So I'm like, I'm pretty sure. And that's fine. So
Yeah.
what we are going to do really quickly, we're going to go to a quick sponsored break, come back and chat a little bit more. So we'll be right back after the sponsored break.
Hey, how you doing? My name is Greg Russell. I'm the host of TechnologyTuesday.com. You can find us on the Conscious Business TV network every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the latest resources to help you make more money in your business. Join us on E360 TV. Come on.
And I just want to mention that this Make Mental Health Matter show is brought to you by our sponsor, Dusty DeGroff at Edwards Jones in Denver, Colorado. So if you want a financial planner who puts you first, call Dusty. You can also go to his website right down here, or it's over here. Scan this QR code to get right to his website. Thank you, Dusty, for your sponsorship. And if you're a company and you want to sponsor this Make Mental Health Matter show, please reach out to me at support@bccevolution.org. We have some spots now open for new sponsorships. All right. Well, I'm going to bring Dr. Dr. Z. I'm going to go by Dr. Z because every time my words don't quite match what my brain is saying.
It's all good.
So if you happen to be just joining us, we have been talking about DEIA, which is diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. Also, really, Dr. Z's story around her experience through mental health, through working for the government, and really bringing light to the conversation with employees. How can we be more accessible, and all the in between, especially with HR, and also talking about being a Black woman with disabilities and how that has been a factor and played a role throughout your life. So that was super quick synopsis, but I would love to also just talk about, so if somebody is out there and say they are going through this period in their life that maybe they have, whether it's a physical ailment or mental health or something else that's coming up, and they're not quite sure how to have that conversation with their employer. I'm curious if you have any tips or tools that you might be able to offer.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for the question. I would say there's an organization called JAN, Job Accommodation Network. It's JAN.org. They have a list of disabilities, whether it's ADHD, whether it's anxiety disorder, whether it's cancer. They have all these disabilities, and you can look up there by typing in the disability, and then it will give you a list of the possible reasonable accommodations that you would need. I would urge you, if you're working for an organization, is to contact your HR office, or if you're in the federal government, contact your EEO office and ask for the procedure for that particular organization and how to enter what's called the interactive process. That means you share with what you would like to have as a reasonable accommodation and support for documentation if you need it. And they will say, okay, we can give you this. But one of the keys I will tell you within organizations, if it's 500 or less, which most accommodations are, about 75% or under $500, it's not going to cause an undue hardship to your organization. But I will caution employees with demanding. We're not going to demand. This is an interactive conversation. You give a little, they give a little. And then you can request that, and it has to be done within a timely time period. So you have to figure out what that is for your organization. But one of the toughest things for someone to who has a disability is the disclosure. Until you learn how to be an advocate for yourself, Kelli. I can tell you, for disclosure, for me, when I was in college, my parents were my advocates. If it wasn't for my parents, I would not be here today. I had reasonable accommodations when I was in college. I had them in the workforce, but it's just, you have to start learning how that you have to be your biggest cheerleader. Kanye West, you guys know who he is, Ye. I think he calls himself now. We know that Ye loves Ye. He wants to thank himself for himself, right? When that's what he does, you got to start doing that for yourself. Be your biggest cheerleader, but then also have a strong, supportive tribe. Like, I have about 3 or 4 people that I can call on at any time when I'm feeling down, or like a situation is getting very challenging. So you need to have a tribe and figure out who that is. But requesting a reasonable accommodation, that's part of your rights if you're here in the United States.
Yeah, I'm like, so much goodness in there. I remember, like, in the corporate job, and I was actually just thinking about this today for some reason, but I had a stand-up desk, and it was like the best thing that I had. I'm like, man, I wish I had that, but it felt like I had to jump through hoops to get it. However, I didn't stop until I got it, because at that time, like, I had a lot of really bad back challenges that were happening. But it made a huge difference in my attitude, in my ability to work. And I didn't feel like I had to go home and lay on the floor the whole entire night. So yeah, I think advocating for yourself and making sure that you are being heard and that the employer is doing what they need, because I think we also, as employees, sometimes they don't know what they have access to. And so giving them that information, I think, is really good.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you advocated for yourself, because just imagine if you didn't, you went in and sat every day, you could have more physical problems down the road, and you began to thrive because you were feeling good. You were at your best.
Yeah, it's definitely one. And I know there's lots of other benefits, like employee resource groups. There are like EAP, like so many different things.
Okay, we got to break this down in case she said employer resource groups. Those are maybe because you're a woman, you were in the military, maybe because your religion affiliation, or your race that you identify with, or gender. And then EAP is Employee Assistance Program, which I am a big fan for, because if you need some help, sometimes financial, like a advisor, but also mental health. They help with mental health, and you usually can get to, I think, between 5 to 6 free therapy sessions with someone. So thank you for shouting those out.
Yeah, I am a huge advocate of EAP too. And I talk about it when I speak on stage, because when I was in the corporate job after my sister passed, I hit this wall and I was like, I have to do something. And they actually gave us 10 free sessions, which was huge. Yeah. So I was able to go talk to a counselor, and that was the first time I had ever used it. Plus, they also offered like short-term disability. So I was able to take time off work, which was huge for me at that moment. And that's why I'm like, if you have EAP, go talk to them, because yeah, they have pet insurance, they have financial, they have, if you need attorneys, they have mental health resources. So I think that's what I love about this show, is telling people about the resources that they may not know that they have.
Absolutely. I'm glad you were able to use your 10 sessions. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was definitely a lot more. I was like, oh, cool. So, well, I would love for you, is there anything else that maybe we didn't talk about that you wanted to share?
The only thing I would say as it relates to employment is when you decide to disclose is when you decide to disclose. I know applications these days sometimes may ask if you have a disability. That's just because HR is just data to make sure that they are not discriminating against a particular type of person. But when you come on board, you can decide, or in the applications phase, because they do ask if you have a disability. I have found for myself since I've been working, all these years, that I like to have during my one-on-one meeting when I first come on board to talk with about when we're talking about expectations with my supervisor, or in this case, maybe a client. I go over what some of the accommodations that have worked well for me in the past. Mind you, I said what has worked well. I don't say these are the ones you have to give me. I just say what has worked well. But having that conversation initially works well for me. For someone else, they might want to wait until they see a barrier and then they identify this conversation they need to have with their supervisor. But if you go onto the jan.org website, you can learn more about having these conversations related to disability.
Yeah, I think that and I was going to ask you too, is because when with applications it says do you have a disability, do you feel like it is beneficial? But you kind of just said it right there, is like you can decide if now's the time or if later is the time. And I guess it kind of depends on what you experience or what you live with and if that's going to affect your job or not. So I like that you mentioned that too.
Thank you. And thank you for dropping my digital business card right there. I am not a coach. I have to say this so much. I am not a coach. I'm a consultant. So if you have a business or if you're working for an organization, you think I will be a great fit to come speak or do some training, please reach out to me on Calendly or send me an email right there. And I would love to have the conversation to see if we'll be a good fit. Because as I told you, it's not always a good fit.
True, very true. Yes, and here's your digital card. It's also in the comments. If you are on any of the platforms, you can see the comments too. So, I am so thankful that you came back and we were able to have this conversation. And I know that you have to jump to go do something, so I wanted to be aware of the time, but I just really appreciate you being open and transparent. And I think this is a really good conversation that we need to start having, because you don't have to be worried about going in and talking with an employer. We all have things that we live with or we experience. And I think that if we can be advocates for ourselves and possibly advocates for others, or maybe reach out to Dr. Z and see how she can help within your organization, that is, again, just an important conversation to have.
Thank you, Kelly, for having me. Thank you for this impactful conversation. And you are a true game changer. Thank you for the work you do.
Thank you. I appreciate you. All right. I will see you soon.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, y'all. Oh my gosh, that was another amazing episode of Make Mental Health Matter. And I think that these conversations are something that we just don't have enough. And it also adds to that stigma. Really, my whole goal with BCC Evolution, and it always has been since day one, is that conversation. The reason why, and I know I've said this in the past, but going into this conversation is the reason why is because I didn't have the tools, the resources, the information at that time to have the hard conversations with my sister who died by suicide. I actually I shut my emotions off to her because I was protecting myself. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to look out for. And it had been so trying on my own mental health to advocate and not take care of, because I wasn't taking care of her, but to know that she had attempted suicide multiple times. And I was really naive in where I was at in my life. Again, we do the best that we can with the resources that we have at that moment. And I didn't really have access to any resources or know any of this stuff. I learn from every single guest that comes onto the show. And I hope that me bringing a variety of people, that whether they're coaches, they're professionals, they are consultants, they are in the DEIA space, whatever it might be, that you're able to open up a little bit. You're able to have these conversations, because I promise you that people want to have the conversations, just sometimes they're not sure how to start it, what to say once it starts. And if you are somebody that's curious, ask. The only thing that could happen is maybe they get upset, but it kind of depends on how you say it. Also, if you're going at somebody in an aggressive manner of like, well, what's wrong with you? Right? That's a very different energy than, hey, I'm really curious. What was that pause about? Hey, I noticed that you maybe have been feeling really sad lately. I wonder if you want to have a conversation, or maybe I can just listen. Would that be helpful? Like, those are very different energies than really going towards somebody and being aggressive, say, of like, well, what's going on with you? Why are you acting that way? Why do you feel that way? Oh, well, that's just rude. Why would you even say that? Right? That's very much a different energy than using what I call the I statements. I noticed, I observed, I wonder, I'm curious. What are some other ones? I'm curious. I see, I hear, like I hear you say that you're really, really struggling. And I'm not really sure how to help you, but I'd really like to if you'd like me to. There's other ones that are you wanting to just vent? Or would you like me to help you think of solutions? That's one that I use pretty often, because sometimes I don't even know what to say. When I'm helping somebody through a situation, I'm not quite sure what to say specifically. And so I just kind of reflect on what they said, is like, oh, I hear you say that you're really depressed right now. Do you want me to help you find a solution or find some help? Or do you just need me to listen? And listening non-judgmentally is sometimes the one thing that people need, because oftentimes those that struggle don't have somebody in their life that really truly listens. We all kind of get in our heads as humans, and we're like, I'm the same way. So I'm calling myself out here. I'm very solution based. I want to help. I'm very much a giver. I want to support people, but I don't always have to find a solution. Sometimes I can just listen, and that's okay. Or if they're like, yeah, I do want help, I need help, then hey, let's find this solution. I'm going to give you a couple different options. And if one of those options lands, cool. If it doesn't, that's okay. So I run a grief and loss group every single Monday. Actually, after this show, it is at 12:30 Mountain Time. And what I've found the most lately is that people just really truly need somebody to listen. They need them to hold that space to be able to express whatever's going on. And I think that goes into the conversation that we just had, is if you're an employer, if you're a leader, if you're in a corporation that you want to be able to have more empathy, you want to be able to have more production um, within your employees, then you really need to learn some of the listening skills or the solution based skills, because we don't have to just look at people as another number, right? Like, we all are humans. We all experience things differently. And again, what I've noticed within this grief and loss group is they really just need a space to be able to talk. Sometimes people just need to get out what they're feeling. They need to express the emotions, whatever it might be, and know that who they're talking to is not going to judge them. because sometimes we just feel like everybody's judging what I'm going to say. So we don't ask for help. We don't go to our employees. We don't self-identify with a disability, and we don't advocate for ourselves. So if we can simply do those things and be open and transparent and honest, I think that it would make life a lot easier. Dr. Z said it the best, is being able to just be yourself. Be yourself in whatever space you're in, whatever company you're in, wherever you happen to be, and just being able to be you, who you are. That can be really, really powerful, and it can be really, really impactful. And so think about that. Maybe the next time that you are, and again, this is for people as employees, not as employees, self-employed, having employees, and or just being you, is how can we be ourselves? How can we advocate? How can we listen non-judgmentally? How can we ask for help? And really, like, what are those ways that we can shift our energy when we're asking questions? Because I know if anybody came to me, I usually always say I'm a pretty open book. So if you have any questions, you can always ask. One of the cool parts about this show is it is live. I can see all the comments that come up, whether you happen to be on YouTube or on the Facebook page. I can actually see your comments that pop up as long as you give StreamYard permission to show your comments. And so I can answer any questions that might be coming up. We can also ask the guests that come onto the show the questions that you might have. I also try to tag them in any of the questions that happen to show up on the live streams once we're done. So if you have questions, or you are like, I need a little bit more clarity around this, ask, because it's better to ask than to assume. So, all right. Well, that was me going on a little bit of a tangent, but I think that that is important, that we just keep having these conversations. And you may not be good at it the first time, and you may say some things that are wrong, and you might feel really, really bad for whatever you said. But the cool thing about being human is that we all make mistakes. My mouth goes faster than my brain can process. And oftentimes I fumble over my words. I do it a lot on here, but what I like to say is it's not about perfection. It's about really truly getting the information out. And I hope that the information that I bring you on this show is helpful for you. And now you're getting more resources, more information, people resources that are out in this world, because I brought on guests from across the world that really are truly in these unique spaces and have the story to go with it. So Mondays, again, I have guests who are advocates or professionals in the mental health space, or those that have a story or want to help people. And then on Wednesdays, we have Warrior Wednesdays. So those are really more of the stories of people, and really, like, it could be trauma. I've had guests who almost became a school shooter. I've had guests who have lost family members to suicide. I have had guests who they just have a story to tell. But that story really leads into this place of hope, because hope is one of those things that we don't have enough of. But if we can have these hard conversations and ask the questions that nobody else wants to ask, then maybe we'll have more hope in this world. And that would be pretty cool, wouldn't it be? I think so. So I hope this was helpful. And I love the conversation that we had today. Dr. Zakiya, I don't ever want to say anybody's name wrong. And I know my brain's like, how do I say it? How do I say it? But I so appreciate her coming on and sharing what she does and being able to have these hard, tough conversations. They're not really that tough, but at least not for me, but I love to just know the background of anyone that I'm bringing on the show. If you want to be a guest on the show, you can be too. Maybe you want to tell your story. Maybe you're a professional. Maybe you're an advocate. Maybe you have been watching the show for quite some time and you're like, I want to go on her show. You can. That's pretty cool too. So just go to bccevolution.org. There's actually a whole page for the Make Mental Health Matter show and a way to be able to reach out to me or just even get yourself booked on the show. Maybe you feel like you fit on Mondays better, or maybe you feel like you fit on Wednesdays better. Whichever day you feel like you fit, there's a link there to go get yourself booked. So that's pretty cool and it's pretty easy. So as a reminder, we are now in October. Holy moly, September went by so quickly. National Suicide Prevention and Awareness Month was last month, but our nonprofit will not stop. There are lots of people, lots of lives that we need to touch. So as a reminder, you can become a warrior for mental health. What does that mean? It's only $19 or more per month, and that goes to support all of our three programs, which is awareness, conversation, and education. So that funding goes directly into our programs, which includes this show. So you are supporting this show and the nonprofit. So go sign up today, again, only with $19 or more per month. And whatever you do, make sure you come back this Wednesday at 7 p.m. Mountain Time. I have another incredible guest for you, and I will see you next time. Bye.